Welcome to the Red Half of Sheffield. I guess we'll call it video slash audio. I don't know what you guys are either listening or watching right now, but if you're kind enough to be watching this video, you guys can see that I am joined by Ian from the 4,000 Holes podcast, and it has to do with the Blades' upcoming match against Blackburn Rovers. Ian, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you, Chad. It's great to have the opportunity to talk to you guys.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. So very interesting. Before we started recording, we were exchanging pleasantries and whatnot, and um, I often ask the opposing person that comes on to make sure I have the right name of the podcast, and I Ian enlightened me that they had just undergone a name change. So, Ian, why don't you get into why it is now called 4,000 Holes Pod instead of BRFC Podcast?
I will gladly do that. Yeah, we have a website which powers all of our content, which is brfcs.com, and that's been around since the mid 90s. And that I think was Blackburn Rovers Football Club supporters, bluntly. And we also have Blackburn Rovers as a club seems to have a lot of fan produced content. And one of the best bits of that fan produced content is a fanzine, which is called 4,000 Holes. And that too has been around since the early 90s, just as we were challenging for getting into the Premier League when it first started. And so 4,000 Holes as a brand is really well known. Now, for those of a certain age, and you didn't have to be that old when the fanzine started, will recognize it as a lyric from the Beatles song A Day in the Life, which is the final track on Sergeant Pepper's. So the lyric goes, and I won't sing it, but I read the news today, oh boy, 4,000 holes in Blackburn, Lancashire. And though the holes were very small, now they know how many holes it takes to fill the Albert Hall. So the fanzine took the name 4,000 Holes. And then when we started podcasting, we called ourselves BRFCS Podcast. But we found that the fanzine name was far more widely recognized, funnily enough, thanks to the Beatles connection. And it is a quirky name, and people do tend to ask us. So at the beginning of this year, we decided to rebrand and call the podcast 4,000 Holes as well, so that it dovetailed nicely with the fanzine, because a lot of the content and a lot of the contributors to one also contribute to the other. So it was just a nice way of sort of getting the content out there. So it's our tribute to the John Lennon lyric in A Day in the Life from Sergeant Pepper's.
Makes okay. It makes sense to a certain demographic, as you said. In another interesting note that I found out, Ian, can you tell the folks that are either watching or listening, where are you broadcasting from?
Yes, I am in Sheffield. I have lived in Sheffield for 15 years. I married a Sheffield lass, as they say up here. So I got married in Sheffield, and I found myself living here very contentedly, I have to say. I'm not the only Blackburn Rovers supporter that lives in Sheffield. There's a little group of us that meets up every now and then. And in fact, we met up before the home game earlier this season in the centre of Sheffield for lunch. And so it's nice to have some fellow Lancastrians to talk football about, and it's nice to have a ground right on the doorstep. So Bramall Lane is effectively my home fixture.
Yeah.
So it's lovely to talk to Sheffield United fans from my house in Sheffield. But there you go.
Yeah, exactly. I mean that's an interesting. When you told me that, I was like, wow, that's a little bit interesting because we don't typically have when we do these. It's usually the podcast and the people coming to us from wherever it may be.
Yeah,
They're usually down the road from their home ground. It's
yeah.
weird that you're down the road from Bramall Lane. So it's a pretty cool
Well,
little deal.
I did go to school in Blackburn, so
Uh,
I'm from a town called Accrington, which has another famous football club, Accrington Stanley. But Blackburn, I say, were my team right from being a boy. And going to school in Blackburn meant that I sort of had some affinity with it. But work has taken me around the UK, and I now find myself in lovely Sheffield for my sins, as they say.
so let's get into the meat of it. So Ian, I guess we can start with a recap of yesterday's fixture as we are recording on Sunday. Your 3-1 win against QPR. And I
Yeah.
guess we can dovetail that into the result from yesterday. And what are your thoughts on Blackburn's season as a whole this far into the season?
Well, let's talk about the season first of all. Then I'll sort of like drill down into yesterday. Our season is odd, very, very odd. It's one of those that will go down, I think, in the record books, and certainly will be remarked upon by statisticians, simply because of its binary nature for large parts of it. So we started off with a series of wins, followed it up with a series of defeats, then went one lost, one lost, one lost, one lost, one lost for a sequence. And it took us, I think it was 19 games or whatever, to have our first draw. So as a result of that, we have a terrible goal difference, but I think we've lost almost as many games as Rotherham United, so like down at the bottom. We've won almost as many as you guys up at the top, but putting those two facets together means that we're just not quite sure what Rovers team is going to turn up on any given day. We have no idea. It's completely, utterly a lottery. So that is interesting in many respects. If you'd asked me back, well, a number of people did ask back in the summer after the turmoil that we'd had, so new manager, new coaching staff, 3 players leaving on free transfer, and a whole host of loan players going back to the parent clubs. I would have been quite happy, and I predicted 14th at the beginning of the season, I think, in our pre-season pod. I'd have been quite happy to shake hands on that there and then, because I thought this is going to be a real difficult transition season. Any manager coming in is going to find this quite challenging. But to be fair to Jon Dahl Tomasson, he's done an excellent job in providing stability. Stability in terms of we're up there, we're still in the playoffs, but we just do this. It's famine or feast, it seems.
Yeah.
But we recently, since we lost at Rotherham early January, we've gone on a run, a good unbeaten run, but most of that was draws. So again, having not drawn for so long, we then drew 6 in a row. We've then won 3 on the bounce. So Blackburn Rovers, what are you going to get? Absolutely no idea. Right. It's the Forrest Gump line. You know, we just do not know what we're going to get when we open the lid on that box of chocolates. So I'm enjoying the fact that we're up there. I'm utterly confused, perplexed, bewildered, don't know quite how we're doing it. I'm somewhat skeptical as to whether we'll be able to stay up there. I think largely because of the poor January transfer window that we had, where we desperately needed a couple of reinforcements and we didn't manage to bring those in. So I think the squad is going to get stretched as the season progresses, whether that's suspensions or injuries. But yesterday we rocked up at QPR, expecting new manager bounce with Gareth Ainsworth joining there. And we managed to come away with a 3-1 win and 2 absolutely superb. Well, 3 goals are great, but 2 of them, it's worth checking out the clips. Just for the first one, a lovely little pass from Lewis Travis, and the second one, a piece of magic on the touchline that, frankly, if Leo Messi had done it, we'd be talking about it till next week, as they say. It was a lovely little shimmy, and then he laid it across for Gallagher to score. So Rovers fans are in buoyant mood at the moment off the back of 3 successive wins. We too have a cup game in midweek. We're away at Leicester City. Don't know what team will be picked for that, but hopefully they just come through injury-free, and then we've got our best possible chance of putting a decent side out against you guys on Saturday.
Yeah, that's. I think we're in the same boat as you guys as well. With the cup tie in midweek against Spurs, you know, we don't know. Are we going to really go for it, or are we just going to kind of see a bit of squad rotation and continue to focus on the league? Basically coming off I guess you could call it a bobble in the, aside from the 1-0 win against Watford yesterday, the back-to-back defeats to Borough and Millwall in the league, and, that what seemed as a manageable gap kind of made everything get a bit tighter, and then we go and get the 3 points yesterday, and then, it's a head-scratcher what's going to happen in this next week. So I'm almost glad you guys are still in the cup too, because it doesn't give you guys the extra couple of days of rest and not having to worry about a game. You too have to worry about a game, so it both sets up for Saturday. Will probably be, in touch wood on both sides, that we don't no injuries. That's the last thing both sides need. But yeah, it'll certainly be interesting when it comes Saturday afternoon. Okay, Ian, enlighten us in who are I guess, I mean, this is an open-ended question. I always ask, is it a set of danger men, or is it just a certain danger man for Blackburn Rovers?
Well, I suppose the guy that we should pick out is Ben Brereton Diaz, the
Mhm.
Chilean sensation, of course, who has really come to the fore in the last 18 months after making his international debut. I think it's 99.99% certain now that he will be leaving at the end of the season. There are rumours that he's signed a pre-contract agreement with Villarreal in Spain. But that's not been confirmed officially yet. And I think if he does sign one, the club have to be informed by Villarreal. So there's still just that scintilla of doubt. But yeah, he's going to be off at the end of the season. So he was the man last season. He was the man up to the World Cup break. And then I do worry that maybe he's just been distracted a little by this talk of a move at the end of the season. That might manifest itself as we get closer to the season's end if he's worried about being injured and things like that. But he is a real talent, there's no doubt. He struggled in his early days at Blackburn. He found it quite difficult to settle into the side and make a contribution. And yeah, there was quite a groundswell of opinion early on that we'd signed someone who just wasn't ready. What you forget, of course, he was sort of like a teenager when he came, and he seems to have really, really grown emotionally, seems to have toughened up physically. But the biggest catalyst has been him playing for Chile. I think that's done wonders for his confidence and just training with those players and playing. Yeah, he has played for Chile against Argentina, so he is one of the Blackburn Rovers squad that can say he's faced Messi in a competitive fixture. So he scored against West Brom, a cracking free kick to save a point towards the back end of the game. So hopefully that puts him back on track. He picked up a knock, so he was on the bench on Saturday, but we didn't need him as it transpired. So he's kind of like the main threat. Our most creative player is Bradley Dack, but Bradley has suffered two really, really bad injuries in the last 3 years. He's done both of his cruciate ligaments. So he's kind of like being nursed back this season. I think Thomason's very wary of bringing him back too soon, to the extent that he was left on the bench last week, brought on as a substitute, and then immediately had a hamstring problem after being brought on. So the irony of it was Thomason was nursemaiding him to protect him, but he still ended up getting injured. So again, Dak was on the bench on Saturday, but not used. So hopefully, I think it's highly unlikely he'll play midweek. So hopefully he'll be back to full fitness for the weekend because we need him. And then really, when you take those two out, everything else in terms of goal scoring contributions, it could be from defence, it could be from midfield. Our standout player in 2023 is our right back, Joe Rankin Costello. Now, there's a tale to tell with Joe because, again, he has been injury prone really since breaking into the first team. He's never seemed to have had that run of games. And he's been used in a number of different positions and never quite nailing one down. And sometimes I think a player's versatility can count against them. But he was drafted in against Norwich just before Christmas, basically because he was one of the last fit men standing. Yeah. Played a blinder, held down his place ever since. And he's just been an absolute revelation. He created a goal on Saturday out of nothing. Lung-busting run down the right wing, cut inside, made fools of two QPR defenders and laid a cross right on the path of Sam Gallagher to slot home at the far post. So Joe Rankin Costello, curiously, could be one of our best attacking threats, but from right back. I think he was originally a midfielder when he first came into the academy, but he has played left side, right side, centre, defence. He's been really, really amazing since December when he came in against Norwich. So those are the three guys probably to watch out for. But we are capable of scoring from defence. We do like to use set pieces. So our central defenders chip in with occasional goals. Daniel Ayala got the winner against Swansea. So that's quite handy. Scott Wharton's capable when he's fit, although he's carrying an injury at the moment. He's always capable of chipping in with one. I'd like to see more goals from our midfielders. I think that's an area where we definitely can improve. We don't score that many, and when you take Brereton's goals out of the equation, there's not much left. But Gallagher got 2 on Saturday, which is great for his confidence. So he's a big lad. He's a big unit. He really should be getting more goals than he does. So hopefully that will fire him up and get him going. So I think Brereton Diaz, the obvious threat. Dak the next one, but watch out for Joe Rankin Costello. Hopefully, I won't nix him by shouting him out in this podcast. We shall see.
Yeah. So I mean, it seems like you guys definitely do have, as you alluded to, attacking threats throughout the side. Yeah, and it would be such a shame to see Brereton Diaz leave England and go to Villarreal. That would just suck because if he leaves Blackburn, and I was hoping he would go somewhere further up the food chain in England just to keep him as a Chilean in England to keep his flair in the game. And now with the chances of him going to Villarreal, that won't be, on TVs all over the place because no one frankly cares about him. But if it was in England, you would see him and you could see his career progress over, the years to come. And if he went to I think he was rumored to go to Liverpool last year, wasn't he?
Oh, there were a number of clubs that were supposedly sniffing around. Most of them were the ones in relegation trouble. So at various times, were rumored to have had scouts in Leeds, Everton, West Ham United. I think West Ham was probably the strongest rumour. But I think he's one of those players, and his profile since playing for Chile, I'd be amazed if every single Premier League club hadn't scouted him at some point, because that would be negligent. It's interesting your view about wanting to stay in England. See, I have exactly the reverse, because if you're not going to stay with my club, I want you to be a success, but way away.
Yeah.
Go a long way away and be a success. Yeah. And then when you're interviewed on Spanish TV, you can sort of say, well, it's those nice people at Blackburn that set me off, you see. Yeah. I think with him playing for Chile, I think learning the Spanish language would help him immensely. I think the style of play is probably closer to his international team. So I think it makes sense if he goes there. My fear for him was that he would end up signing for someone like Everton and Leeds, being thrown straight in, maybe not getting off to the best of start and almost being written off. I think if he does go to Spain, culturally, that will be a great fit for his international career. And I think he would offer something a bit different than the standard sort of Hispanic forward. I think one of the things that most attracted him to Chile was his physique. I think just having such a big lad, and they play him through the middle. And I think he terrorized some of the South American international defenses that he came up against. And seeing him score for Chile was it was vicarious thrill, obviously, but he played for England under 19s, I think. And then seeing him pull on the red shirt of Chile and scoring was just fantastic. I wish he'd stay with us, but I perfectly can see the rationale for him leaving and moving on. And the club made him some crazy sort of 1 year deal. But he'll be able to get double that playing in La Liga in any event, and we just don't have the economic nous to be able to compete with that.
Yeah. I 100% understand it. If Blades don't go up, we are going to get overhauled, and we'll be probably closer to League One in the years to come than we will the Premier League. If this is a very crucial year for Blades. Okay, so Ian, you living in Sheffield, I would have to believe you've heard a few times about the Mighty Blades. What are your thoughts on the Blades season this far? You could just say, "Oh, I don't even pay attention." Even though I live in the city, I see the papers, I crumble them up and say, piss off.
There are plenty of people. I don't go to the office that much these days for obviously the reasons of the last 2 or 3 years. But when I do go in, there are a number of Blades and Owls fans. I'm sorry to mention that word on this podcast, who are always happy to chew the cud. Most of the Blades fans in the office, of course, are always happy to talk to me after you took us apart at Bramall Lane in August. And I have to say that was a real salutary lesson, because we got off to such a good start. And we felt it's never an easy place to go, as the cliche would have it. But coming, with your squad coming down, you'd held it together. You got the parachutes and all of that sort of stuff. This was going to be an acid test, and we were absolutely shockingly bad. really, really poor. And getting away with 3, we felt like we'd sort of like managed to dodge a bullet there. So I think United were always one of the sides that I thought was going to be up there. I have to say, you're mercilessly ripping apart of Burnley. I was hoping was going to be a precursor to them collapsing and sort of like just disappearing down the plug hole. And it seems to have had exactly the opposite effect,
Yeah.
where you've galvanized them now to a point where they'll never drop a point again. So that's deeply scary. But I watched that with great glee. I have to say, it was on TV, live on TV on the Saturday. And watching you dismantle Burnley was just fantastic. That felt good to walk around the city centre the day after and just bask in the glory. But no, Sheffield United, clearly, I think any side coming down with parachute payments, you've got to respect the clout and their ability to sort of like. I love Sanderberg. I think he's an amazing player. Every time I see him, he seems to glide across the turf and just be a cut above everybody else. Why somebody from the Premier League hasn't come in and offered whatever it is that you would want to take it surprises me, because every time I see him, I think the man is class. Undai was the one in August though that we couldn't handle. It was just really annoying. It was fast, tricky, skillful. I think it was just too much for us. We just couldn't cope with him. So that was a bit of a annoyance, to put it mildly. And Billy Sharp, I think in his various incarnations, he always seems to be a thorn in our side, irrespective of who he's played for. And he seems to have done most of the clubs in Yorkshire and then gone back to his first love, of course. So it doesn't matter how old he is. I think you could pick him at 45 and he'd still score against us. So our expectations are structured. I am expecting a really, really robust game. I'm expecting it to be tough. And if we can get a win on Saturday, that would make it 4 league wins on the spin. And having beaten you guys, which should give our squad a massive confidence boost. I think the worry is if you dismantle us with the surgical precision that you did in August. And that might have some downsides for our enduring confidence. But we shall see what unfolds. As I said right at the outset of this, we never know which Blackburn Rovers is going to turn up. And if we don't know, there's no way your scouts can know which Blackburn Rovers is going to turn up and prepare for it.
I would hate to be like, what side is going to, okay, they're 3 wins on the bounce here. Okay. They could go to 4. Could the same team turn up? I don't know, but it's funny that you use Ndai in I call him Sandy Barge. It's a Sheffield United podcast, social media whirlwind with all of us different Blades podcasts that we've kind of given nicknames. And so it's funny that you say Ndai and Berger. And when I alluded to, if we don't go up, those 2 players are the first 2 that are going to get pipped right off of us, because Ndai, albeit, he's still young. We call him Skilla-Man, because he just, one way he'll be going and then he'll tornado around the other way. And it's like, where the hell's he going? And then Sandy Barge, I mean, as inconsistent, he has spells where he's very inconsistent and goes missing for large parts of games. And honestly, in the last probably month and a half, he hasn't been at his best, but then he'll nick an odd goal here and there and you think he's back, and then he'll play out of his mind for a couple games and then he'll go back to where he's gone missing. So, you alluded to who United's dangerman in, and then it's funny, if I could compile a list of everybody we've had on and everybody, Billy, El Capitan, Billy Sharp, he is what he is. He pisses opposing fans off, supporters, opposing teams
especially
off.
Wrexham supporters, of course.
Oh, don't even get started on that one.
That was fantastic. Again, I watched that on TV. And I've watched the documentary because I'm a massive fan of both Reynolds and McElhenney. And great documentary, really terrific. But Billy Sharp was just having none of it. I absolutely love that. I absolutely love that. Yeah. Like, stick that in your Hollywood sequel. It's some really good stuff.
Exactly. And then the FA charges him for, speaking his mind. And if I was Billy Sharp or anybody, I'd be like, I'm probably going to get charged with something, so I'm not going to speak my mind. Oh, what did you want to say? Oh, Wrexham are the greatest team in the
Yeah,
entire whole of England. They're a great side. Oh, I'm sorry I scored against blah. Nah, don't worry
yeah,
about it. I loved what he said. He's speaking his mind. You can't do that anymore because then you get slapped on the proverbial wrist. But yeah, it it's crazy how opposing teams, and I love him dearly, and it's crazy how every opposing team, they're, you ask them, and Billy couldn't have played for us for a couple of matches, and they always bring up his odd name, and
yeah,
it's crazy to hear that, and the skipper. I think this year it's kind of caught up to him. The game's kind of got him and kind of passed him. I mean, it's gonna happen. I mean,
is
he's
he
getting
what,
up there. He's
35 now?
yeah,
Yeah,
he's 35 or 36. He's getting
yeah,
up there in, footballing years. He's not gonna always be at the top of his game. So
yeah,
it's kind of, it would kind of be cool if he, we got promoted this year, almost kind of riding off into the sunset and saying like,
yeah,
see you guys. Thanks for the career. But I would, if we also do go up, yeah, I don't have us pipped to survive relegation next year, but it would almost be like Storybuck to end his career in the Premier
yeah, yeah,
League
yeah,
and just be like,
yeah.
okay, I
A
can close
fitting
the book
end.
on my
Yeah,
career. I'm gonna
yeah,
go retire and probably be the Blades manager in 15 years down the road.
yeah, yeah.
But
He's a terrific pro. I think he's one of those that's kind of probably a pro's pro.
mhm.
Yeah, he's absolutely honest workhorse. And I say he's perennially a thorn in our side
Oh
and
yeah.
many others. So yeah,
So
one of those to look out for.
Ian, I guess we can get down to the most important part of it. Well, where what is your score prediction for Saturday's game? Blades
We
go
see
away
this is
from home
this is where I
to
invoke
Wood Park.
psychology, you see, and I predict obviously a heavy Sheffield United victory on the basis that I can't possibly tip Blackburn to win because that would just bring down the footballing gods. I was doing something like this with some Watford fans a few weeks ago, and they inevitably asked that question. I said, well, I'm going to tip you guys to win for exactly this reason. So there's no way I'm tempting fate by saying Rovers will win. I said we had 6 draws on the bounce. We've had 3 wins on the bounce. It's probably time to start the draws again.
Mhm.
So that wouldn't surprise me. I'd probably take a point. I'd probably shake hands on a point right now, if I'm being perfectly honest, just to keep that unbeaten run going. So much in our games depends on who scores first. I think psychologically we defend the lead far better than we try and claw one back. So I think that's really tough going. But I am mentally scarred by the experience that I had at Bramall Lane in August. And the only consolation was I didn't have far to go home. I could just
True.
get on the tram, and within 20 minutes, I was pretty much back home. And that was the only consolation from what would have been a thoroughly chastening experience. So I think, yeah, if you were to score early, I would be really, really, really worried that we might ship 2 or 3 again. If we score first and just rattle you a bit, then who knows? But I'll tell you what, I'm going to predict a 2-1 victory for Sheffield United. I hope that the footballing gods don't see through my obvious double bluff, which
I
is
mean,
that I want Rovers to win 2-1.
I mean, honestly, I think it's gonna be nowhere similar to what the reverse fixture was back in August. I honestly was aligning with you when you said a draw. I think it probably ends 1-1 or God forbid 0-0 draw. God, I hope it's not one of those watching paint dry games. But yeah, I think all I can see, I mean, I could see us nicking it 2-1, but my heart right now, I mean, we're less than a week out and we do
Yeah,
have that game against Spurs. I just think it might be a game
that's
too
the big unknown
far.
for both of us, I think, where we don't know how many injuries were going to come out or what sides are picked, and
Mhm.
who. Yeah, it is a difficult one to call because I think, not, but I presume neither of us would want to get humiliated by Premier League opposition. at this
Yeah.
point in our seasons.
Yeah.
But equally, yeah, if you gave the stark choice of picking 11, 17-year-olds to protect the first team, then yeah, that would seem eminently sensible. On the other hand, I
Hmm.
think we will go with what I would sort of say is probably a 75 or 80% team against Leicester.
Hmm.
I think there are two or three players that are carrying knocks that won't be risked. I
Hmm.
think we need to be very, very careful. One good thing is Brereton Diaz is suspended, so he can't play the FA Cup game. So he'll definitely get a rest. As I say, I don't think Dak will play. So that leaves us a bit toothless in the cup. So I
Hmm.
suspect that's going to be a case of something like probably a 5-4-1 type formation, and just try and keep Leicester out for as long as we can. And if that works, we might do the same with you guys on Saturday.
Hmm.
It
Yeah.
will be interesting to see.
Yeah. I think, I think Blade's lineup kind of, almost uh, like you said, you don't want to go and get battered against a Premier
No,
League side and ship 4 or 5 goals, because then it's a major blow to your confidence
yeah,
going into the weekend. So I think we'll put out a decent side midweek and kind of probably lose 2-0, 2-1, maybe some 3-1,
yeah.
something like that, but not bad enough where we, have to bring on the cavalry. Like, for some odd reason, we had to do against Wrexham. I would have just been like, okay, just let them have it and go on and, have all their glory. But yeah, it really depends on how both sides line up as where we go into next weekend's game. So I got a couple more questions for you,
Okay,
and I know you have one for me.
I do.
So this is one question. Where do Rovers finish full time, last game of the season? Where do Rovers finish? And is this a season promotion? Albeit it might have to come through the playoffs. Promotion could be a real possibility if you string a bunch of games, a good unbeaten run here,
Yeah, yeah.
leading up to the end of the season. Is this something that is promotion, on the periphery for Rovers fans this year?
Emotion is very much the cherry on top of the icing on top of the cake. As I alluded to at the beginning of our conversation, our expectations at the beginning of the season were, my word, whoever comes in and replaces Tony Mowbray with all the turnover in staff and players is going to have their work cut out. I was at one point deeply troubled and feared we might get sucked into a relegation campaign, and then we pulled two or three signings out of the fire fairly late in the window in the summer, and he thought, right, okay, that's not too bad. So pre-season, I predicted 14th. It's so tight and so congested in the championship. Our running, we're already doing that thing of trying to, well, we've got nick a point there, get a win there, maybe, and so on. So we have a really tough run in sort of the last 3 games of the season, but that cuts two ways. It's one of those, well, if you win all of those games, you're knocking down your rivals and you're potentially jumping above them. I think our squad's 2 players too thin
Hmm.
for the playoffs, if I'm being scrupulously honest. I think 10th is eminently achievable, and I think that would be an incredible achievement. Frankly, I think Thomason would deserve lots and lots of credit. Anything in the top half after where we started the season, I think is a really good return. But we are just, I say, this amazingly, incredibly Jekyll and Hyde sort of side. We just, you can't call it. In all my years of watching Rovers, and that's far too many than I care to recall right now, I've never known a side that leaves me totally bewildered like this one does. Some days I'm tearing my hair out thinking, my God, we just have a shot. And then there are days like Saturday where it's a really, really comprehensive professional performance. See, you can do it. You can do it. And I feel a bit like a parent chastising a child. I know what you're capable of. Don't disappoint me and go
Yeah.
out there and do it. So, and I would think 10th is probably realistic. But if we were to get into the playoffs, I mean, that's just nuts. That's just crazy based on where we started. And in the playoffs, well, anything can happen.
Yeah.
You
I
are
mean,
three games away, and it's a mini cup competition. It's almost like running a marathon, then being asked to do the 400 meters hurdles.
yeah, right.
Well, yeah, these two things are supposedly related, and they're both athletics events, but they are
Yeah,
different disciplines and need different mindsets and a different approach. And that's all I think. That's what makes the playoffs such compelling viewing. It doesn't matter what's happened in the previous 46; you start again from scratch,
exactly.
and that can be a good thing and it can be a bad thing, and it just depends. where you are going into it. But
more times for not, when it involves blades, it never comes out on the winning end for blades. But one last question, and I have I didn't ask you this coming into it or whatnot. I am a connoisseur of, well, I wouldn't say connoisseur. I'm a beer guy. I don't know about yourself, but
I do
what are
like
your
a beer.
thoughts? One of my favorite beers, and I cannot get it over in the United States, and I'm trying every single avenue to get it over here to the States, whether it has somebody has to buy it and ship it and I have to pay them. Where does Carling come in your beer rankings?
Uh,
Are you a
pretty much,
fan?
pretty much at the bottom.
Oh,
Dreadful, dreadful, fizzy nonsense pop. Have I broken your heart now?
oh, everybody over in England, I love it. And I am
Really?
a drink. Oh yeah, I love it. I
Oh,
absolutely love it. But it comes from, I'm come from the land of, you know, we're not buying the most expensive. There's a spectrum over here, and I love Guinness,
yeah,
as everyone in this podcast knows. And then
yeah.
there is a really, 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 really cheap end beer that usually students that go to college or even young high schools, they love it. But I drink it
It
every
used to
week.
be in the UK. It used to be Foster's. I think when I was a student,
Yeah.
because there was a big push by the brewery, and they used Paul Hogan, the Crocodile Dundee actor, to push it, and that was awful, awful stuff, but terrific marketing campaign. You must promise me this one thing, next time you come to Sheffield. On Sheffield railway station, I don't know if you're aware of it, on
Mhm.
platform 1B is the Sheffield Tap.
Oh, really?
So there is a pub on Sheffield railway station. Every time Rovers play at Bramall Lane, I tip off as many people as I can that are arriving by train and say, you've got to go to the Sheffield Tap on I think it's 1A or 1B, I can't remember, on platform 1 anyhow. And it's the old waiting room, the old Victorian waiting room for when the station was originally built. And it's been converted into a microbrewery.
Hmm.
So if you go right through to the back, you can see all the wonderful copper sort of brewing pipes and
Hmm.
casks and kegs and all this sort of stuff. And they have an absolutely astonishing range of beers, both on draft and on bottles. And if you get their menu, it's like a telephone directory. There's just page after page after
Hmm.
page after stuff. Do not drink another pint of Carlsberg or, or Carling or Foster's or anything without going to the Sheffield Tap first. Try one of theirs. Thornbridge is the local brewery around here.
Hmm.
So it's sort of like a Peak District-y southwest Sheffield sort of brewery, and they do ranges of ales from session ales that's like 3.2 ABV. And my personal favourite Thornbridge is Jaipur, which is one of the stronger ones, and they only serve it. Well, they used to only serve it in half-pint glasses.
Hmm.
It's want to be drunk with respect.
Yeah.
But as an IPA, it's absolutely amazing. If you try one or two of those, and you turn around to me and sort of say, "Right, I've tried them. Now I'm going to go back to my lager. Then I will forgive you. I won't agree with you, and I cannot condone you, but I will forgive you." So next time you're in Sheffield, whatever, make sure you go to the Sheffield Tap, and I'm sure many of your listeners who are based in Sheffield will recognise the name of that. There are a number of real ale pubs in Sheffield, down in Kelham Island, and the Beer Engine is one of my favourites near to Bramall Lane as well. That's another one that I tend to frequent on a match day when I'm going down there. So don't drink the nonsense, drink the good stuff. Here endeth the party political broadcast on behalf of Sheffield Beers.
Yeah, I mean, when I was over there, I think it was when I was over there for the Millwall game after the game was over. I think it was the Kelham Island Beer Fest I was a
Yeah,
part of, and
Kelham
yeah,
Island is fantastic.
I
Yeah.
drank. Well, I don't even
Too
know
much.
what yeah, I drank too much, and I don't even know what I was drinking. But yeah, I you know, it's I was just going because I was with a bunch of locals over there, and they just kept
Yeah.
saying, "Get this and get this and get this and this," and so I will give credit to the Sheffield area that they do have a bunch of microbreweries and different types of beer aside from my favorite Carling. But Yes, it's
Carling,
uh
dear oh dear.
yeah,
The only
yeah.
good thing Carling did was sponsor the Carling Cup for a few seasons. So I'll forgive them that. But
uh
when we won it, it was the Worthington Cups. That's another dreadful beer that was. I don't think you can buy that anymore. I'm not sure it's still going. But anyhow, there we go.
so Ian, you do have one question, and
Yes, yes.
most of our listeners are, have heard this story, but go ahead and ask it.
Always fascinated by foreigners how they pick their team, because when I go on holiday, invariably, if there's a match in the locality and I have to adopt a side, if there's a game playing that's on local TV, I have to pick one team. I've got to have skin in the game, and then they become my team in that country, kind of thing. So, how did you land upon Sheffield United? Is the curious question.
It's one that's a precarious kind of question because I didn't really, you know, soccer as we call it over here, it didn't gain traction. It's one of the, I would say, the biggest growing sports over in America.
Yeah, yeah.
In my opinion, in 5 years, it's probably going to be level pegging with the NFL over here in terms of viewership
Okay.
and whatnot. And back when I was in college, it was early days of me just, you know, throwing it on the TV in the background as I did homework on a Saturday morning. And so I originally started out as a, because that's all they showed over here was the Premier League. So
Yeah,
I
yeah,
picked up mid 2000s, 2006, 2007, 2008. I picked up, and because they would show Chelsea every game. So I started out as a Chelsea supporter for probably and ran that out for 10 years, less than 10 years maybe. And I just started to hate how they turned it into a monopolization of the American market, because over here in America, you're one of the big six clubs. You know,
yeah,
you're
yeah.
Man City, Man United, Chelsea, Liverpool, Tottenham, Arsenal, whatever, what have you. And so, I mean, that was the easiest thing to go to because it was on TV all the time. And so I kind of, played a lot of FIFA growing up and when I was in college and whatnot. And so I kind of was just, I saw the blades and, just kind of was watching from afar, because then after a few years of starting to follow the Prem, then I found out about the Championship, League One and League Two. And
Where
I
the
kind
real
of,
action's at, yeah.
yes, where it's not all for the cameras. And so I saw United, and they were rooted to the bottom of League One, sitting 24th in, closer to League Two than actual promotion in League One. And then the hiring of Chris Wilder comes in. They have the 100-point season and get promoted to the
Yeah,
championship.
yeah.
And I didn't follow. That's when I picked up following them. And then when they got up to the championship, and I was able to see more of the games on our streaming. I say more of the games, but they put them on a streaming service over here, picks up one game, usually the Friday night EFL game, and then one
Yeah.
the early kickoff in the EFL, and then the 3 p.m. kickoff in the EFL. So there's 3 time slots we get. So the Blades started to show up more and more. So I started to tune in more and more and more, and then they got promoted to the Premier League, and I could see it every week. And so I've been invested ever since. And
Very good.
it's kind of good that I don't, follow along with everybody else. I like to do my own thing and write my own story.
That's the crux. Yeah.
Mhm.
So my Spanish team is not Real Madrid.
Yeah.
Because I went to Madrid on for a city break, and we got tickets to go and see Atletico Madrid.
Hmm.
And so I thought, no, I'm having the not the big team. Although having said that, I've now acquired another Spanish side, because I want to go to Bilbao, and Athletic Bilbao have close historical links with Blackburn Rovers. I might have to. It's another red and white striped side, but yeah, I can do that. We picked up a lot of fans from the States in the Brad Friedel era. So when Brad Friedel was
Hmm.
playing for Rovers, there were a number of fan accounts that follow us in the States. And when I asked them this question, I saw Brad Friedel was playing for Rovers. And so it was interesting to see his club team. And of course, we were in the Premier League for large parts of his time at Rovers. So that dovetailed nicely and brought quite a few over. I don't know, have Sheffield United ever had a US international? I think they had it.
Not
No,
off the top of
Wednesday
my
had
head.
John Harkes, I can remember, but I can't think of
We
it.
were close to signing Antoine Robinson, who now plays for Fulham, but we missed out on him in
Right.
the relegation season. But I don't believe we've had.
No, I can't think of one. No.
No, I
It,
don't think
it,
we
it is
have.
interesting. It was sort of like watch, with the way that we were talking about Brighton Diaz. If he goes to Villarreal, then
Hmm.
inevitably I will sort of like keep an eye out for there. So I might end up with three Spanish teams. This is ridiculous. You can't have three Spanish teams.
Half the league.
I'll have to cull one or two, but not Barcelona, not Real Madrid.
Yeah.
That's the important point here. So well done you for picking Sheffield United for that criteria. Yeah.
I mean, it's in to me a lot more people, and that's because I am pretty knowledgeable in when it comes to England and it. I love the Prem. Well, I don't really love the Prem. It's just on because it's on. I much, you know, to the chagrin of most of our listeners, honestly, yeah, it's cool that we get promoted next year or this season and go up to the Prem. But honestly, there's nothing better than a Saturday championship match or or
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
watching League One or League Two or even the National League. You know, that's where grassroots football is, and it's
Yeah.
not all about the pomp and circumstance of the Prem. But when people come to me and say, Chad, who should I pick as a side? I said, do yourself a favor, wander down the leagues
Yeah.
and you have the blue collar teams in
Yeah.
and around. There's some historic clubs in in the championship, League One and League Two. I mean, massive history, massive clubs, and they have way bigger history than most of your big six clubs have. Do me a favor and pick one of those sides and just enjoy the ride.
Yeah.
But it's so often over in America, we always have to root for a winner. We always had to
Yeah.
do that.
Yeah.
So everybody jumps on the teams that win the league, that play in
Well,
champion.
we clearly picked up a lot of overseas fans in 1995 when we won the Premier League, and again when we won the League Cup in 2002. That raised our profile, and we had a number of sort of foreign players that have been very influential for the club during those two wins. So you do attract people in. Kits is another one. I think because we've got such a distinctive kit, then people
Mhm.
watching us will say, oh, "Who's the team in the halves?" So I think if you're playing all red, all white, all blue, or whatever, it
Mhm.
doesn't stand out. Stripes, halves, anything that's a bit flashy, sashes over. I will watch Argentinian games and say, "Oh, Boca Juniors, oh, River Plate," because you recognise the kits, and I think that's fascinating. And
Yeah.
I know a number of people who aren't from Blackburn have started supporting us because they said they saw us on TV and liked the shirt.
Yeah.
So it's we all have our reasons. So.
Yeah. It certainly is an interesting, I would say, development over here in the States because it has really taken off in the last, I would say, 3 years with the more exposure that the Prem's got
Yeah,
because you
yeah,
can find, as opposed to watching it over in England, you can watch every Premier League game. You buy a streaming pass, and if it's not on actual TV, then it's on the streaming pass, and you get a goal
yeah,
rush where it goes around the grounds in the
yeah,
Prem
yeah,
to watch
yeah.
all the goals go in. So that exposure has just absolutely blown it up. And like I said, in 5 years, I think it's going to be rivaling the NFL in ratings and fan base and just the demographic. A lot of younger people are starting to get into the game and whatnot. So it's crazy to see where the game of football is definitely going to go in 5-10 years over here in the States. But it only helps grow the game if everybody chooses their own path and doesn't follow down the same path as
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know their their friends or their fathers or their families. If you find a team, Leighton Orient, League Two, running away with League Two right now, you know, a historic club in London. you follow them. Just the absolute insanity of a ride of getting relegated. And most supporters over here in America, if you ask them, would you, if you went, your team, say Everton has a huge supporters group over here. If Everton got relegated next year, would you guys strike the check for £140 to watch every single game home and away over here? And most of them say, I don't know. Most of them will probably jump on the wagon of another team and start following them until Everton figure themselves out and got back up, because they don't really know. They're like, when you tell people that it costs almost 200 American dollars to watch Blades play every single game, they're like, "Are you serious?" I said, "Yeah, that's what happens in the lower leagues." I said, "It's not all it's not all spoon fed to you on a TV and say, here, pick whatever channel you want to watch."
You've got to go hunting for it, but
yeah,
as you say, it's more satisfying. I think I am genuinely fascinated to see the growth of football in the States, and since the World Cup in '94. Obviously it's going to come back next time round. It's going to be interesting to see how it kicks on again. Obviously, through college sport and the success of the women's team, I think has been amazing in terms of like building that up. And certainly last time I was in New York, there was a lot more prevalence of games on TV screens in bars and things like that. And our good friends, New York City Rovers, they have a meetup with lots of other fan groups in a bar. I think it's near the Empire State Building somewhere, and they post photos regularly of all these different fan groups with the flags up and the shirts. I think that's just absolutely terrific that this culture has permeated across the way. But I do keep an eye out on how MLS is developing. It'd be interesting to see how that picks up, particularly after the next World Cup. So
yeah, that's the only thing that's pretty far out. The quality of that is watching like maybe bottom end championship League One caliber. I mean, you have your New York teams, your Los Angeles teams that bring in well-known players from Europe and whatnot, and so it elevates their squad. But your
it takes a generation, doesn't it?
Yeah,
for domestic players to come through. It takes a generation. I think we're now certainly probably on that second generation, because I think since the '94 World Cup.
Yeah.
So fathers are handing down to their children, and I get the sense in the US it's a much more family experience as well.
Yeah.
Going to sport than perhaps it is in the UK. So
yeah,
it bodes well for the future.
Yeah, 100%. Well, I think that is about all the time we have for this video/audio recording of the Red Half of Sheffield. Ian, where can the people find you on social media if they want to interact, get to know more about Blackburn Rovers?
That'd be terrific. I would point them all to brfcs.com. That's our catch-all website. So there are various tabs on there that link through to the 4,000 Holes fanzine and the 4,000 Holes podcast. Our podcasts are on Spotify, Apple, and on all the usual platforms. But if you go to brfcs.com, what we have on there is a very old-fashioned pre-Twitter, pre-Facebook forum. And we all thought that when social media kicked off, these things would die. Quite the reverse. Yeah. They're living and breathing, and all forms of human life are in there. And what we find quite often is that visiting supporters will register a profile just to ask the home fans, what are you, much like the conversation we've just had. And those that come and genuinely want to talk about football, we welcome with open arms. Those that want to come and just lash abuse at us will get banned immediately. But go to the forum, have a read, have a look at the comments. You'll get a real sense of why Rovers fans are so confused and so perplexed as to what's going on. As I say, but the fanzine is always worth a read as well. I think supporting fanzines of different clubs is always great. So it's 4,000 Holes fanzine, 4,000 Holes podcast. We're on Twitter as brfcs.com, and brfcs.com is our URL for the catch-all parent website. So thank you for that plug. That's really good.
Okay. And you guys you should already know this, but you can find me at cjarvis_13 on Twitter, and follow our page on Facebook and Twitter. On Facebook, the Red Half of Sheffield, and on Twitter at Red Sheffield. So until Saturday, this is a 12:30 kickoff, pardon me, at Ewood Park. I'm gonna say up the Blades.